The next matchup that we have to talk about, we have the Baltimore Ravens, 8-3 on the year, taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are 5-5-1. The Ravens enter this game as a 4-point favorite. This game is going to be played on CBS with a 4:25 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff. The Ravens, last week on Sunday Night Football, defeated the Browns 16-10. They were in a dogfight. And that game pretty much went how I expected it to. It was a low-scoring game. It was dominated by defense. It was a sloppy game by both offenses. Lamar Jackson had 4 interceptions on the day. The Steelers got beat down and embarrassed. And let me give a viewer discretion out there, parental guidance. What I'm about to talk about when it comes to Pittsburgh's performance last week may offend a lot of you Steeler fans. It offends me just talking about it, being a Steeler fan myself, but it was gruesome. It was graphic. It should have had a rating on the game. It should have said rated R. Because, boy, that was a really horrific scene that we saw last week. And Mike Tomlin came out today, Tuesday, during his presser and said that changes are going to be made. As a matter of fact, he promised that changes are going to be made. Now, he said that he doesn't know how effective the changes are going to be or when he's going to make the changes. The changes could be made tomorrow. They could be made a week in advance. But all he said was that changes are coming. Now, when you look at the Steelers, you got to be incredibly disgusted with how their defense played last week. Now, we know what the offense did. The offense hasn't really done nothing all year, so that's not a surprise. But we have a high level of expectation when it comes to the defense. And last week's performance was inexcusable. They couldn't stop the run. And you definitely can tell that the Steelers are missing Stephon Tuitt and Alualu. And Alualu hasn't really been talked about all that much because he isn't a guy who fills up the stat sheets in terms of getting a lot of pressure and a lot of sacks on the quarterback. But he is really good when it comes to stopping the run. As a matter of fact, he's probably one of the better interior run stoppers in the league, so they're definitely missing him. Don't know when Stephon Tuitt is suiting up to play. Like, I've been anticipating him playing all this year. He may not even play at all this season. And for the Steelers' run defense, man, like, a lot of people putting the blame on the defensive line, which I can understand that, but I don't really feel like the defensive line is the problem when it comes to run defense. The run defense has been bad this year because of the poor linebacker play out of Devin Bush and Joe Schobert. Devin Bush has been really disappointing this year, and that's just me being nice, and a lot of Steeler fans probably will agree with that. There were a lot of high expectations for Devin Bush coming into this year, and he hasn't really lived up to those. The speed hasn't really been there. He hasn't really had the season that he had his rookie season. Then you look at Joe Schobert. The Steelers traded for Joe Schobert. And remind you that Joe Schobert signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars for a good amount of money. And the Jacksonville Jaguars were willing to send him off. And I understand why. So the inside linebacker play has to be better. Maybe you got to bench Joe Schobert. Maybe you got to bench Devin Bush. But some adjustments have to be made. Now, when it comes to corner, we know that corner was going to be a little bit of a rough spot because you're going to have some younger guys like James Pierre there. And I like James Pierre a lot, but he struggled last week. Like, he had a big touchdown that he let T. Higgins catch on him, which ended up being a highlight reel. It was just really embarrassing. Now, in this game, you're facing a Ravens offense that they don't really have the weapons at wide receiver that the Bengals have. But one thing about Baltimore that we all know is that Baltimore has one of the best rushing attacks in the league, and you got a game plan for stopping Lamar Jackson. Now, Lamar Jackson struggled last week against the Cleveland Browns. But also, Lamar Jackson hasn't really played his best football historically against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike Tomlin has normally came out with a great game plan to defend Lamar Jackson. Now, how is the game plan going to change this year? Because you don't have TJ Watt playing in this game, or you may not have TJ Watt playing in this game because recently he was put on the COVID-19/injury reserve list. So his status for this game is pretty much up in the air. So the Steelers are going to need Alex Highsmith and their other edge rushers to step up, because when you play Baltimore, you have to be able to keep Lamar Jackson from getting out to the edge, and that's something that Cleveland did a really good job at last week. They didn't allow Lamar Jackson to get out to the edge, and that's really big, and Pittsburgh's going to have a lot of success being able to set the edge against Baltimore when you're trying to slow down this rushing attack. Now, defensively, if you're a Ravens fan, you're feeling pretty good about your defense going into this matchup against a Pittsburgh Steelers offense that has struggled all year. Now, the Steelers offense has struggled when it comes to generating, being efficient, because the Steelers aren't really all that efficient on offense. Now, there's a misconception that a lot of people have about Big Ben, saying that he can't throw the football downfield. Like, I don't really understand why people continue to push that narrative, because there have been several plays throughout the year when Big Ben has thrown the ball for more than 50 yards downfield and has generated big plays through the air, via that be Deontay Johnson or Chase Claypool. So the big matchup in this game is probably going to be wide receiver Deontay Johnson versus cornerback of the Baltimore Ravens, Marlon Humphrey. Now, Deontay Johnson has been the best receiver on the Steelers roster this year and the most reliable wide receiver on the Steelers roster this year. He has 68 receptions, 809 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. He's been Big Ben's go-to guy all this year, and if he doesn't have a good game against Marlon Humphrey and Marlon Humphrey is able to shut him down, then that's not going to vote well for the Steelers offense, because outside of him you got Chase Claypool, but after that things get incredibly thin at the wide receiver position when it comes to the depth and talent there. Then on top of that, Najee Harris has pretty much been the focal point of the Steelers offense, and if he doesn't get going, the Steelers don't really have a lot of success. Where the Steelers are at their best and when the Steelers were winning games is when Najee Harris got the ball in his hands a lot. It's when Najee Harris was being dominant, running the football on the ground, and the Steelers are going to need that rushing attack if they're going to have a chance to win this game. But here's the thing: the Ravens have the second best run defense in the NFL. As a matter of fact, they only held the Cleveland Browns to 40 rushing yards as a team. And yes, Nick Chubb did play. And yes, Kareem Hunt played. Nick Chubb had 8 carries for 16 rush yards last week. If you're a Steelers fan, you should be terrified. Because if you can't run the ball and you got to throw the football to win the game, that's not a recipe for success. Because Big Ben, it looks like this is probably going to be his last year. When he's been asked to have to carry the Steelers, he hasn't really been all that great. And it's not a winning recipe if Big Ben has to throw the ball 35 to 40 times to win the game. And on top of that, you look at how the offensive line has played. The offensive line has been hit and miss at times. And I don't really think the offensive line for Pittsburgh will be able to hold up in pass protection. So the run game is going to have to get established some way, somehow. And that's pretty tough sledding, because you look at what the Ravens did to Cleveland last week when it came to slowing down their run game. I don't really think this is going to be a game that the Steelers are going to be able to win with Najee Harris carrying the load on the ground. This is going to be a game that Big Ben is going to have to get it done, throwing the ball 30 or 40 times, and that doesn't really sound like a winning recipe if you are a Steelers fan. And on top of that, the play calling for Pittsburgh literally only involves 3 routes: slants, out routes, and fly routes down the field to Chase Claypool or Deontay Johnson. Not really a lot of variety in the play calling from Matt Canada, so he's going to have to do something different, okay? You can't keep doing that same jet motion sweep with Chase Claypool. Like, it's too predictable. The Steelers' offense is too predictable. It's either run, slant, out route, or back shoulder fade. So something's going to change. Something has to change if Pittsburgh's going to win this game. I don't have a lot of confidence that it will. So I'm taking the Baltimore Ravens to get the win, and it really pains me to do this as a Steeler fan right now. But I think changes are going to come. I think adjustments are going to be made. I just don't think that those adjustments and changes are going to be effective this week against the Baltimore Ravens, because those adjustments don't just need to be made on defense. They have to be made offensively. And right now, the Steelers' only way of really moving the ball is through the run game and being able to have the run game going to set up the play action pass game. The run game sets up the pass. Some teams use the pass game to set up the run game, but for the Steelers, they need the run game to set up the passing game. And when you look at how good the Ravens run defense has been all year, I don't really expect a lot of success out of Najee Harris in the run game of Pittsburgh in this matchup, which is why I'm going to take the Ravens to win this game. 24-14 is going to be my final score prediction in this matchup. If you're watching this on YouTube, let me know who you guys have winning this game down in the comment section down below. Make sure that you check out the JT Sports Podcast. Every video that is uploaded on the channel is available in audio format on every single podcasting platform. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, the JT Sports Podcast is available. All you gotta do is type in the JT Sports Podcast on any podcasting platform. It should pop up. Or you can click the link down in the description and it will take you to it. Also, make sure that you follow me on my social media pages. My Instagram and Twitter are both at JT_Sports. And I appreciate you guys for listening to this episode of the JT Sports Podcast.